Well, hello and welcome back to the Scale My Shopify Store podcast, and welcome to my final episode for 2023. Kath Langman here, your host on this show. I can't quite believe that I am back in the studio for the final episode of this year. It's been such a big year in so many different ways. I've spoken about lots of different topics on the show this year, had some amazing guests on the show this year. And we've rebranded the show this year. It's been quite a big year for this show. So thank you to all of you listeners who have been regularly tuning in and listening. I know many of you let me know that you're enjoying it. Some of you email me and tell me a particular episode was a good one and you enjoyed it. And I love receiving those messages. Anytime you are happy to share that with me, I love hearing it. But I'd also love if you did love an episode, if you jumped on over to Apple Podcasts and left me a review, that would be so, so, so amazing. I know I'm always encouraging you guys to be, reaching out to your customers and asking for customer reviews. So it works the same for me too. But today, I suspect this will be an episode that some of you will love and some of you may not. This may not be for all of you. I'll be curious actually to hear which ones of you listeners really dive into this content today. And that's because today's episode is my annual book review. I am a book lover, I am a reader, and I also listen to a lot of audiobooks. In fact, just last weekend, I came across the most comfortable, amazing armchair with a footstool, and it was from a secondhand store, an antique armchair. One of those beautiful old chairs that have a nice high back and really comfortable cushioning, and it's my new reading chair. I can't wait. It needs a little bit of a clean up first. But anyway, with this episode, I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I've read this year that have been books that I've read with the view to educating myself for either upskilling in business, new knowledge for business, or just inspiring content around high performance and that sort of thing. So some of it's strategy related and some of it is a little bit more, I guess, mindset or psychology related. But all of the books that I'm going to talk about today were really, really enjoyable reads. I will say that, with the books that I read for business, I do typically listen to them on Audible. And the reason that I do that is because I always find that when I'm reading a physical book, I do that when I am sitting up in bed before I go to sleep at night. And if I consume any kind of content that's going to really inspire me and motivate me and give me ideas for business, then I just can't get to sleep afterwards. So I typically listen to audiobooks in the morning when I'm exercising or when I'm doing one of my many drives to and from the swimming pool with one of my kids. So that's what I do. But I'm still going to, say that they're books that I've read, even if I just listen to them. Anywho, I'm not going to tell you about all of the books that I read this year, just the ones that I really enjoyed, because I definitely did read some that were a little bit boring and not particularly inspiring. And so I'm not going to recommend those. There's nothing worse than listening to an audiobook that is read by a boring reader. I mean, why would people hire a narrator who can't, read well? It's just the worst. Anyway, I've got a handful of books here to tell you about today, and I will kind of talk them through in a little bit of an order, not necessarily from least favorite to most favorite, although I have saved my most favorite to last. But I wanted to start with a book that I only came across recently, and it's called The Diary of a CEO and the author is Stephen Bartlett. So if you are one of my UK-based audience members, you may know him. I believe he was or is one of the judges on your Dragon's Den TV show. And I don't even remember how I came across this book. I think it might have been recommended to me. It was a pretty fun read, and the author actually is the narrator, and that usually ends up being a much more enjoyable performance to listen to. And so Stephen Bartlett, he started out as I'm pretty sure he dropped out of university and he started a social media marketing agency back when Instagram and social media was new. And he's become incredibly successful. He's been, owned multiple businesses now, and obviously he's an investor if he's a judge on the Dragon's Den. But have a think about, have you ever wondered why some people seem to have a Midas touch when it comes to their careers and their personal growth? And Stephen's argument is that it's not just luck. It's about filling the right buckets: knowledge, skills, network, resources, and reputation, and in a specific order. And starting with knowledge. So this is why I wanted to start with this book, because books can be such an amazing source of knowledge. And he argues that this systematic approach can unlock your potential and really set you on the path to success and fulfillment. And at the very outset of, as I said, the most critical bucket to fill is knowledge. And so you want to think of knowledge as the foundation of a skyscraper. So the stronger your foundation, the better your knowledge, the higher you can build. And of course, knowledge comes from education and also, the relentless pursuit of learning, which is where books can be so amazing. And you probably already have a lot of knowledge as well in many areas. But I think anytime any of us are attempting something we've never done before, which potentially is growing a business, so we're likely to need some new knowledge. But once we gain knowledge in any area, then it's time to, of course, transform that into skills. And these skills are like the tools in your toolbox. They're honed through practice and they're honed through application, and they make you valuable, not just in your own eyes, but in the eyes of others as well. So your growing expertise becomes a magnet that helps to attract people into your network. And then, of course, from there, that's where the magic begins to unfold. Sometimes, you might observe some people, and I'm thinking about, young generations, perhaps when they, graduate from university or something like that, they want to skip the entry level jobs and go for the senior jobs, and it's like, well, you just can't do that, because you actually have to go through the steps until you've gained the experience, and go from there, rather than jumping past. As Stephen says, you've got to attain each stage in the right order. And then with a robust network, you get access to a whole lot of additional resources. Resources could be tangible, like money or tools, or intangible, like advice or mentorship. I guess the more successful you become, or the more of an expert in more experience you have in your career, the more access you're going to have to people who also have even more experience or resources or expertise. It'd be pretty hard for the intern at a major corporation to just pick up the phone and try and speak to the CEO, right? So, obviously you're going to get greater opportunities as you go. And then the final bucket to fill is the reputation. So that's the crown jewel, according to Stephen, and it's the testament to your knowledge, your skills, your network, and your resources. And a strong reputation, opens doors that might have been closed in the past. So, those are the kind of steps or the 5 steps that Stephen talks through in quite an entertaining way. He's very engaging in his book. And like I said before, he really warns us against shortcuts and attempting to skip ahead and then fill a later bucket first. For example, taking a big job just for money or status, but without, the knowledge or the skills first, you're going to be a failure. So, I think there's a lot of analogies in business as well. If you're starting a business, but you actually have no idea about anything, any aspect of business, whether it's the marketing, whether it's the operations, whether it's the business side of things, then you need to go and get some new knowledge first. And then you need to practice each of those steps to get the skills and the experience before you can expect to really reap the rewards and the benefits of that effort. So definitely recommend that book. But the next book that I want to talk about is actually the most recent book that I've read. Again, a really, really enjoyable one. And it's called The Art of the Impossible. And the author of this book is Stephen Kotler. I'm pretty sure this was only published a couple of years ago. And in this book, you can probably gather from the title, but he argues that there is a formula for doing the impossible. People have done the impossible, and they're doing the impossible every day, breaking world records in, almost every day in many different domains, whether it's athletes, in different sports, or scientists coming, having new breakthroughs in science, activists, entrepreneurs, of course, and, many other disciplines as well. So in this book, The Art of the Impossible, the author, Stephen Kotler, attempts to demystify the act of achieving big and small acts of the impossible. So he's really researched the science behind how this works. So what is the answer to accomplishing the impossible? I think so many of us entrepreneurs, when we start a business, we start with our big ideas and our, something we're passionate about and we're ambitious about it. And then, things get pretty tough in business. I don't think I've met anybody who has really achieved something significant in business without finding it hard along the way. And so it can feel impossible at times, right? And, in those moments, I think it's so easy to just assume that we're actually, maybe this isn't for me. And I don't think that's the case a lot of the time. I think, perhaps it's that we could take a different approach. And so in this book, the author talks about the answer, or the secret, lying actually in our own biology, or our neurochemistry, to be specific. So much time, energy, and literature in the self-improvement domain has been spent on ideas around personality. But personality doesn't scale, whereas, so yeah, what the author is saying, basically personality, you're going to have skills and strategies and ways of doing things that work for one person, but they're almost guaranteed to not work for other people, because, so much of that is dependent on limiting and uncontrollable factors like socioeconomics or genetics or the environment or IQ. Whereas biology is different. Biology is designed the same way for all of us. So, therefore, the secret to high performance lies in decoding our fundamental neurobiology, and doing so helps us to really understand the mechanism behind our decisions and our actions. And so this author actually went about studying hundreds of high-performing people from very different professions and disciplines over 3 decades. So it's a decent, scope of work that went into producing this book, and a lot of experience and information gathering and all of that kind of stuff that went into it. So of course I want to know I want to know the answers to this. So he goes quite deep into the neurobiology, which is like, what is the thing that makes people high performers. And he talks about flow, and I think a lot of us would instinctively know what flow is for us. You'd say flow is where you feel your best and perform your best, and it's just easy, and you can kind of lose track of time, you know. So there would be times where you're doing something and you're completely absorbed by whatever it is that you're doing, and you're so focused on that task at hand that everything else just sort of disappears, you know. It's like action and awareness kind of merge together, and your sense of self kind of vanishes, and time passes strangely, and your performance also just soars in this moment. This is kind of, you're in flow when you're working in your zone of genius, I think. And so the author identifies the physical and the cognitive impacts of flow, of which the cognitive part of it is, you know, kind of the more interesting and powerful. Physically, so strength, endurance, muscle reaction times, all of these things significantly increase, whereas pain, exertion, and exhaustion, if I can say those similar words without tripping over myself, decrease during flow. I mean, if you think about it, like if there's a real need, if you, like, say you're a mum and your baby just got stuck under the car tire, like you would get that car off that baby's leg, right? So, you know, the ability to push past physical limits that you never thought you could do before, you do it. So there's plenty of examples in history of that. But cognitively, motivation and productivity, creativity and innovation, learning and memory, empathy and our awareness of our environment, and also cooperation and collaboration all seem to skyrocket as well. Apparently, scientifically, as high as 500% above the baseline. So flow is to extreme innovation what oxygen is to breathing. So flow is necessary, but not sufficient. It's not the only thing that we need if we want to achieve the impossible. And so the other qualities that we need to cultivate are motivation, learning, creativity. So there's four altogether: motivation, learning, creativity, and flow. And so these are the four crucial abilities for tackling the impossible. And, you know, the book goes deeper into all of these abilities, what they are, how they work, and how to optimize them. But ultimately, I just loved this book. You know, for a highly ambitious person like myself, this author's work, you know, this book, it just really spoke to me. And also, I would say, you know, I'm a fairly kind of sensitive person, and I would say that, you know, I am somebody who is a little bit vulnerable to the ups and downs of life. Um, so, you know, by reading a book like this, it just really helped me to look at my life and my thought patterns and the, you know, the way that I move through life and in the environment a little bit more objectively, and see what needs to be adjusted in order to achieve what I want. And what I learned from this book is how my brain is working, you know, and what I can do to preserve my ambition and to really, you know, continue to develop my grit and what's the word? Yeah, grit, I suppose, is the best word, you know, like you need to be resilient. That's what I'm reaching for. And, you know, as I really try and move ahead. And, you know, not just in business either, but other aspects of life. And just to finish with this particular book, in it, there's a quote from William James, who philosophized that the reason we are not living up to our potential is that we're not in the habit of living up to our potential, which, you know, I love. Maybe one more comment, because I have some notes here, and this is a quote from the book. We are all capable of so much more than we know, and this is the main lesson a lifetime in peak performance can teach us. So, you know, let's try and get a little bit more out beyond our comfort zone, which is where we find out who we really can be. And, you know, it's the only way, if we, you know, we're going to discover if we're capable of really pulling off the impossible, whatever that is for us. So really, really engaging book, and, you know, really good storytelling in this book as well. All right, the next book that I'm going to mention, I'm not going to say a lot about this book, but there was such a good takeout from this book that is so relevant for every single business owner. So this is a very business strategy related book. It was called $100 Million Leads, How to Get Strangers to Want to Buy Your Stuff. And the author of this one is Alex Hormozi. These days, Alex Hormozi is an incredibly successful author and investor and business owner, but originally he was a personal trainer. He just also happened to be really smart and ambitious and a great salesman, whilst also actually coming across as quite a humble guy. So this book contains kind of the playbooks, I guess you would say, that took him from sleeping on his gym floor to owning a portfolio of companies that generates $200 million per year in under a decade. Pretty crazy stuff. So his argument, based off his experience in multiple businesses, in multiple industries and niches, is that you can get 2x, 10x, or 100x, 100 times more leads than you currently are without necessarily changing anything about what you sell. Now, in the context of e-commerce, leads equals website visitors. And, I will say that most of this book is really focused on service business strategy. So, it's not all of it's not going to be super relevant, but it's still, I mean, it's such an easy read and, pretty engaging one as well if you're going to listen to it on audio. But I'll go out on a limb and say, I expect you listeners probably want to get as many visitors to your website and convert as many of those visitors into buyers as you possibly can. And you probably want to do this as fast as you can as well, because that's how we grow, right? And there was one section in the book that I just want to talk about today that was such an amazing takeaway and so very applicable to all kinds of business, but especially to e-commerce businesses. And that was about content creation. So he talks about, creating content to share to an audience, and that the content you create itself isn't the compounding asset, the audience is. So, the thought there is that, of course, even though the content may disappear in time, your audience should and can keep growing. And in the book, he does, he talks about how, initially in business, he just thought that really, really big kind of billionaire business owners like your Kardashians of the world, they were just super, super successful just because they were famous. And and then he had this realization, and it's like, it's because they have this audience. And, it's not that we all have to have a primetime reality show in order to gain an audience. All of us can grow an audience. It's just that actually most of us don't spend enough time pursuing that goal. And, as an example, this author, he literally spends hours every day creating content to share on all the different free channels. And I'm not suggesting that, all of you or even myself have the time or the patience to create that much content and spend that much time. If you're a startup, you're doing all the things, right? Or even if you're a little bit further along in your business, you probably still have, you probably don't have 5 hours every day that you can be creating and sharing content. But the point is that, there's so many businesses, especially e-commerce businesses, where they're actually not really creating any content at all, aside from perhaps some ads. And, we just shoot ourselves in the foot because we aren't focusing enough on building an audience. So that was a great takeaway and a great reminder on that one. Next book that I want to talk about is by an author that I've read a few books, and I've spoken last year on my book review episode. I spoke about books from this author. And it's called Be Your Future Self Now. And the author is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And so I just wanted to start with a quote that is mentioned in the book. To be or not to be, that is the question, which of course was a William Shakespeare quote. And, the idea here is that your past does not define you, your future does, or rather, how you define your future defines you today. So do you have a big and bright future pulling you forward, or are you letting your past dictate your future and limit who you can be and what you are capable of? I would say so many of us do the latter. I would say I've probably, had some limiting beliefs based on the past, and, it definitely can hold us back. So in this book, Dr. Hardy introduces the reader to their own future self and how amazing our future can really be. And basically he just has this really amazing, kind of really easy, tangible, clear way of stepping out, a complex idea in making it really easy and simple. And he really shares some interesting, fun, and engaging anecdotes along the way as well. So, this goes a long way beyond the kind of Dr. Seuss, oh, the places you'll go. He is a psychologist, and he brings in science-based strategies and tactics that help us to really design and shape our future, and how we can actually realize that most compelling future, perhaps even, beyond our wildest imagination. So, it's kind of a bit like a guide, this book. And so just to mention a couple of quotes, one being that this is from the book. Research shows that the more connected you are to your own future self, the wiser decisions you make here and now. Contemplating your future self, you're more likely to invest in and set yourself up for an abundant retirement. You're more likely to exercise and eat healthier, and you're less likely to engage in delinquent or self-defeating acts. Maybe I should read this to my teenagers, not that they're really delinquents. This author, he tells a lot of stories, but one of them I wanted to share today. Some of you may know Mr. Beast, aka Jimmy Donaldson. My kids know who he is. He's a YouTuber. So in 5 years, Mr. Beast went from a 17-year-old kid with no money, little skills, to making tens of millions of dollars in income, and being one of the most famous people probably on the planet, but definitely online. So Jimmy used his future self to become his desired future self, and he became, the fastest rising internet sensation ever. So what did he do? I love this. He recorded a series of 4 videos to talk to his future self. The first video was his future self in 6 months, 6 months into the future. The second video was his future self 12 months into the future. The third one was 5 years into the future, and the fourth one is 10 years into the future. So I think the story goes that he recorded all 4 videos back in 2015, and he actually scheduled them to go live on his YouTube channel at those time intervals. So he recorded them and scheduled them on the same day, but they would go live on, that far into the future. So the 10th one hasn't gone live yet. But basically in each video, Jimmy spoke from his future self. And so he was talking as though these things had already happened, right? And he talked about things like, he hoped he had X number of subscribers to his YouTube channel. And after the first video went viral, Jimmy, and he'd crushed those goals, and then he, exceeded each goal, the goals he had for each of the subsequent videos that have gone live. So like I said, there's one still to go live. And he just, in the process of doing this, he really built, like, the momentum just really, really grew. So did his confidence. And he was able to really embody that Mr. Beast persona, and he started to create even crazier videos with more confidence and creativity. And he was really inspired by how he connected so deeply with his future self. And it seemed to work. So that was an idea that I actually decided to take on myself. I certainly haven't published videos and scheduled them to go live like that, but my version of it has been to record a short audio clip as though it is 12 months from now, about, the things that, I guess the reality that I am in 12 months from now, and the things that I've achieved, and a few other things. And I try and listen to it most days. I probably could be a little bit more consistent and listen to it every day. But, I'm giving that a go. So, that's, a tangible thing that I think all of you could do as well. And at the end of the day, I think just to channel the notion from this author that your future self is not set in stone. There are an infinite number of directions that your life could go in. And, if you try and follow and implement, so there's actually 7 steps in the book, the future video or audio clip, that's just one step in the book. But as you start to apply the steps, the argument in the book is that our lives start to really quickly change. So yeah, I only read this fairly recently. I can't tell you too much yet. I don't know that enough time has passed for me to say whether this 100% works. But, I do think that I am operating with a bit more flow and I don't know, it's like the difficulties and the challenges of the everyday, which used to get to me all the time, they just seem to be a bit more insignificant now, because I'm really aiming for that that future vision. So just, I guess it's an exercise that helps to make that future feel a little bit more tangible to the now. All right, second to last book, and this one is my second favorite for the year, and it's called The Art of Learning: An Inner Journey to Optimal Performance by Josh Waitzkin. And I actually came across this book mentioned in the Future Self book. And so Josh Waitzkin, he was a chess and a Tai Chi, the martial arts version of Tai Chi champion, world champion. And over the years of his career, so he was chess first and then martial arts second, he cultivated a love of, lifelong growth and excellence and mastery. And this book is essentially his memoir, where he really shares his unique strategies for learning and for pursuing excellence. So like I said, this book was my second favorite of the year. It was probably one of the most engaging and inspiring books, let alone memoirs, that I've ever read. And I think it definitely deserves a different title. I think a lot of people would probably walk by that book based on the title. I mean, again, I just can't say enough about this book, really. The author also narrates it if you listen to the audio version, and he does an excellent job of it, really brings it to life. So I just want to share a few key takeaways and quotes from the book. The author says, "The key to pursuing excellence is to embrace an organic, long-term learning process and not to live in a shell of static, safe mediocrity. Usually growth comes at the expense of previous comfort or safety. Meaning, if you want to be excellent, you need to maintain a high degree of curiosity and remain on the steep part of the learning curve, which can often mean choosing to stretch yourself a little bit more than what might be comfortable. But, the long run benefits of that sort of approach can really bear lots of fruit." Next quote: "Growth comes at the point of resistance. We learn by pushing ourselves and finding what really lies at the outer reaches of our abilities." And what this means is if you never fail, you're just not aiming high enough, because without failure and pushing yourself to the limits, you're unlikely to learn and grow rapidly. And the next quote is, "If I want to be the best, I have to take risks others would avoid, always optimizing the learning potential of the moment and turning adversity to my advantage. That said, there are times when the body needs to heal, but those are ripe opportunities to deepen the mental, technical, and internal side of my game. When aiming for the top, basically, so what this means is when you're aiming for the top, your path requires an engaged and searching mind. So we need to make obstacles motivate us to creative solutions, and so don't let those setbacks stop us or set us back. We actually need to be digging deeper and deepening our resolve in those moments. And just know that, if there is injury or loss or whatever, we're going to grow a lot from that. Those are those moments are often our greatest teachers. And, even though it can feel scary at that moment, there's a lot of opportunity to propel us to the next level. So the next quote is, in my experience, successful people shoot for the stars, put their hearts on the line in every battle, and ultimately discover that the lessons learned from the pursuit of excellence mean much more than the immediate trophies and glory. So what does this mean? I think it means dream big and pursue big achievements. You might miss the mark or you might hit it, but you will learn far more in the process than if you set your eyes on a small goal. So the next quote that I really loved was, one idea I taught was the importance of regaining presence and clarity of mind after making a serious error. Obviously, if you're in a martial arts competition, a serious error could be potentially, physically injurious. But the point here is that when you make a mistake, it's just really important not to lose yourself to the emotional reactions of that, right? And to try and remain clear-headed, present in the moment, and just really focused, so that allows you to move past those mistakes and to keep growing. And the next quote that I really loved is, it is rarely a mysterious technique that drives us to the top, but rather a profound mastery of what may well be a basic skill set. I mean, how true is that? Success, I do relate this to business a lot. So success really comes from some unique genius. It's the daily grunt work that compounds over time to cultivate, basically we just need to cultivate the mastery of the basic skill sets, and a lot of other people don't master that. And this can become our greatest competitive advantage. Another quote that I loved, a takeaway, was, the human mind defines things in relation to one another. Without light, the notion of darkness would be unintelligible. And, at the end of the day, us humans, we do look at the world through a relative lens. We're always comparative. We're comparing our success to others, whether we're comparing to friends or to other businesses. And we don't tend to compare to the average. So, we really want to look at everything through that comparative lens, and, give, not allow ourselves to, I guess, fall victim to that comparisonitis. Another quote that I really loved was, in the end, mastery involves discovering the most resonant information and integrating it so deeply and fully it disappears and allows us to fly free. Because when you master something, you operate at the highest level with ease and grace. While skill development requires hard work, repetition, and patience, mastery is the fluid and harmonious integration of what you've learned in your life. And in the book, he talks about, as a grandmaster, at playing chess, for example, he can play multiple chess games at once, and he can walk around the room and play multiple chess games at once because he is so experienced and so masterful. He can look at a board and take in so much more information than a beginner. A beginner is still learning the pieces and the movements and the calculations and has to spend a whole lot more time thinking it all through to get, to arrive at that same amount of information. And this is really what you get when you work with someone, whether it's a mentor or a business coach or somebody who is a lot more experienced. You're not just buying, a little bit of their time. You are buying years and decades of experience where they can, where they have that mastery. They can look at a situation and interpret so much more information from that than a beginner could looking at the same data, if that makes sense. A couple more takeouts from this amazing book and this amazing man's life. Instead of living with a disempowering fixed mindset, cultivate a growth mindset. Develop a love for learning, and with that growth mindset, crises and failures become opportunities to learn and grow. And he uses the analogy, be like the blade of grass in a storm, not the brick wall when your car smashes into it. So I loved that. Learning to invest in loss as well. Gosh, this was a hard one to come at for me. Learning to invest in loss will allow you to put yourself on the line and see what's on the other side. Sometimes it's not good, and other times it's what propels you to your growth. He talks about how in his martial arts training, he would quite frequently, as a beginner, pair himself up with the biggest, most experienced, strongest dude in the room. And he talked about how for weeks and weeks on end, he would go to training every night and literally be flung like a rag doll all around the room, and would go home, covered in bruises. But he believed, and he found through his experience, I mean, that's a pretty brutal way to go about it, it's pretty extreme, but he found that he actually gained the skills and the abilities so much more quickly as a result. I mean, obviously you don't want to keep being thrown around like that. And then one last thing as well that was such a takeaway, and it's about interval training. So this is, a little bit of a different takeout from the book, but instead of always trying to be on, learn to take short rests and allow yourself to recharge. Your thinking is often clearer after a period of rest. To learn how to ebb and flow quickly between being on and off, introduce interval training into your exercise routine. In between sets, you let things go and you relax the mind, and then you get going again, and your new abilities will flow over into your performance outside of the gym as well. He talks about, obviously, that's in a sporting arena for him in his martial arts, but it works so perfectly well with business because, as entrepreneurs, we are working really, really hard. A lot of us are working relentlessly year round, especially in a startup. We're not taking holidays yet. But what he was able to do is to even in competition, he could seriously expend, absolutely leave it all on the mat. But knowing that there was several rounds to go and a minute to catch his breath in between, but he had trained himself to be able to recover in such a short space of time. And I think a lot of the time with us entrepreneurs, we kind of just assume that we're only going to have the time to relax and recover and recuperate when we have a long vacation. But it doesn't need to be like that. If we have those shorter moments of recovery built in, even if it's like 10 minutes of meditation in the middle of the day, then we are going to be able to sustain the level of energy and focus and, clear thinking and all of the rest of it, productiveness for longer. So I did really, really like that. And then just one more from Josh Waitzkin, and that's about fearlessness. So fearlessness is just people who learn to sit with their fears. You will always have fears and anxieties. So instead of trying to overcome them, learn to better relate to them. And I just love this because the fear of failure just holds so many of us back in business and in other big endeavors in our life. I'm absolutely going to share this one with my kids as well. I think it's an amazing takeout. On to my final book for this episode, and I know this has become a little bit of a long episode, but so I'll try not to go on too long about this one. I listened to this book literally 3 times over. When I finished it, I started it again, and I just kept listening to it. The book is called 10x is Easier Than 2x. It's another collaborative book, collaboration between Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And last year on this episode, I spoke about 2 books that I read from those 2 authors, The Who Not How and The Gap and the Gain, both excellent books. I would highly recommend that you read those two first in that order and then read this one. So amazing book. I would say this is like, this book is very, very much about business strategy, but still written and read in a way that is incredibly engaging and, I absolutely loved the format. The format they delivered it is the same as the last two books, where in between each chapter, the two of them it's almost like a little mini podcast, extra conversation that's not in the printed book. So, so good. The previous book, which I said was my second favorite, I mean, they're kind of equal favorites in a way. That one was less business strategy and just more, life motivation, and, trying to really get more of an understanding of psychology and why we do things and how some people can just really do the most amazing things, and how to make that a possibility for more people. So, but this book, very much business strategy. The goal of this book is to encourage entrepreneurial leaders to aim for big breakthrough goals. One of the main insights is that whilst 2x, so doubling your business, seems easier than growing your business by 10 times, the opposite is actually the case. Because with incremental growth, everything seems important and it's hard to identify things to stop doing. But when you want to grow by 10 times, when you 10x your goals, that's kind of impossible, right? And it forces you outside your current level of knowledge, your current level of assumptions, your current way of doing things. And it really forces you to take a step back and rethink things. And in doing so, that you might actually find that there are many paths to get to the incremental 2x results. And there's probably very, very few paths, if not maybe only one, to get you to the 10x results. And therefore, getting that kind of clarity around the activities that you should be doing and the people that you should be working with to produce the most of your results is really, really critical. And, the end result of this, they argue, is that to 10x your growth, it requires you to actually eliminate 80% of what you're doing the existing things that you're doing, whether that's products that you're selling or the roles that you are personally fulfilling, the mindsets maybe that you're holding back. There's lots of different ways that you can implement that 80-20 Pareto principle. But this is what makes it so transformative, and why 10x can ultimately be easier and simpler and require less effort than 2x. The challenge is to have the courage to let go of 80% of things that seem so important in the moment, right? Particularly for those of you who identify as your type A perfectionists. It doesn't mean that you drop them entirely from your business necessarily, but it probably does mean that you personally need to start divesting things off your plate and delegating, not necessarily all at once. We don't want you to go broke, but, over time, right? Another key insight from this book is that 10x is primarily a qualitative goal. So it's about quality and innovation. It's not actually a quantitative goal. So the idea, again, is, focusing on mastery and doing a few things extraordinarily well. And, we will be far more impactful and effective than if we were doing a lot of different things at a common kind of average level. Mr. Beast is mentioned in this book as well. There's this story I'll just touch on briefly about Mr. Beast making his YouTube videos, and he talks about making videos 10% better than everybody else can get you 4 times the number of viewers. So ultimately, higher quality effort, higher quality everything kind of it compounds your results. It produces the exponential results. So basically, the argument is that 10x goals are easier than 2x goals because they are less competitive and they require you to go really deep on a few things rather than really broad on many things. So to put it another way, 10x doesn't require you to be 10x better than everyone else, but it does require you to commit to the path of mastery. So it's more about identity than an aggressive action plan. And in fact, in the book, they actually talk about, really cutting back on a lot of different things, including, the number of days a year that you actually spend implementing in your business. because as the business owner and as you grow, you actually need to be able to have time for creative thinking, creative problem solving, all of that mind work, then which becomes so impossible if you're busy all the time. The busiest person just has no headspace left for creative ideas. I don't know about you, but I've certainly felt that over the years. So they say in the book that we must do radically fewer things but better. And they do have a lot of takeaways that they actually list out at the end of each chapter in the book. But aside from the ones that I've already mentioned, another key takeaway for me was that the bottleneck in a business is often you, as in the business owner, me, the business owner. And I constantly find this true, not just in business either, like it's in life as well. But I also notice this with all of my clients, whether that bottleneck relates to a lack of knowledge or a lack of skills, or, that you either need to learn yourself or hire to your team, or it could also be a lack of ideas where you might benefit from expanding your network, as, was kind of mentioned in the first book that I spoke about. The point is to find people to take on every task that is not required for your, unique ability, the 20% that you should be focusing on, your zone of genius. So those, doing anything else, any other tasks, are the things that keep you stuck on the hamster wheel. And then we need to get specific about what we are optimizing for and what pursuing mastery will look like for each of us individually. It's not going to be the same for any of us. So how will you use your 20% of unique ability to innovate and really raise the bar on quality in your business or in whatever you're pursuing? And then, if you feel discouraged at all, immediately check that you aren't measuring yourself against your 10x goals, like not measuring the gap from here to there. And instead remember and celebrate how far you have already come. And on that note, that is the note that I really wanted to finish on with this episode. Two of my clients, shout out to Caroline and Jess from the Grow Journal. They have this wonderful practice at the end of each year. They celebrate their year in business. They take themselves out for some kind of treat. This year, they took themselves out for, I think it was like a facial and then a really nice lunch. And, they do that, doesn't cost a lot of money. And they do that to really celebrate how far, all of the achievements that they've had for the year. I absolutely love that idea. I try and find ways to do that myself as well, because, as entrepreneurs, we're always looking at what we haven't done yet and the mountain to climb. Don't do that first. Go and celebrate the good things first, the wins and the learnings, and then you will definitely come back for the new year feeling inspired and motivated and feeling excited by what's to come next. So I just wanted to finish on that note. I hope you've had a great year. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I can't wait to see you all and be in your ears in 2024. We're going to dive into some episodes about planning, and I have some amazing new stuff coming up. And that is it for today's episode. Bye for now.